So today we're going to read a quite interesting article. In fact, it's quite hilarious when it gets down to it, because it's going to be covering Grimsby, the town in the UK that had the largest fishing fleet, is now wanting special exempt status from Brexit. So this town that voted leave all of a sudden is now deciding, yeah, we don't want Brexit, we want to be an exception to the rule. So, let's find out why, shall we? There are some fantastic bargains on offer at Fredge Fisheries. Cod, sea bass and small haddocks, to name but three. Lovely fish sold by a traditional fishmonger in a town that once boasted the world's greatest fishing fleet. All, however, is not well in the beleaguered port of Grimsby. Quote, I think a lot of things will go up when Brexit goes through, grumbles Len Arnold, an 80-something Grimsbarian who decides in the end on a nice bit of haddock. His wife, Joan, explains that it's tasty, easy to cook, and at the moment, good value. I don't think prices will go up that much, she counters, but if they do, well, if you want to leave it, that means leaving the EU, you're going to have to pay for it. Anyway, we haven't got long to live, have we? So it won't matter to us. It's a struggle, admits Adam Glandering. After serving the Arnolds, the 30-year-old fish merchant whose father, Dave, bought the Freeman Street market stall 3 years ago is a Brexiteer, but is beginning to get cold feet. People are not really aware of what is going to happen, he says. We are still unsure. Perhaps in 18 months it will do us good. Suddenly we'll get our own waters and do our own fishing. That's what they say anyway, but I don't know. If you lose it, it won't come back. Any extra on importing fish would have a knock-on effect. I don't think we'll be able to cope with it. Last week, a local delegation of food chefs went to Westminster to bend the government's ear about an impact of a hard Brexit would have on the area. Grimsby's days as a major seaport are long gone. And today, huge quantities of fish, an estimated 90%, are imported from Iceland and Norway. The delegation warned that import tariffs, delays on deliveries, and a shortfall of foreign labour would cause great harm to their industry. So now they tell us. North East Lincolnshire is one of the most Eurosceptic regions in Britain. An overwhelmingly majority of its constituencies, 71.54%, voted last year to leave. For decades, many of them have blamed Brussels for the decimation of the fishing heartland. According to this narrative, expounded upon with great gusto by the likes of David Davis and Michael Gove during the referendum campaign, the former visited Grimsby for a vote leave flotilla along the Humber. Westminster politicians sacrificed our traditional waters on the altar of self-indulgent Europhilia. In a further satirical twist to the story, the recent delegation to Westminster came up with a cunning plan. It urged the EU to give their port a free special trade status after the breakup, a Brexemption, if you will. Talk about wanting to have your fish cake and eat it. The plan is reasonable to say. A fair bit of mocking in the Twitter sphere. The TV psychic Brian Cox asked for an exemption for the whole of the UK. If Grimsby can get it, can I have an exemption from Brexit too, please? Asked author Emma Kendry, another Remainer, posted, the approach they are taking is Grimsby voted for it, Grimsby agrees with it, everywhere should take the consequences except Grimsby. I'm in favour of a free trade deal, says Adam at Fredge Fisheries. We need something. I'm sure the big companies would feel they were able to carry on, but small businesses wouldn't. It wouldn't be worth doing anymore. In fact, the big seafood processing companies like Young's and the Saucy Fish Company are also worried about Brexit. Their main concerns are the high tariffs which would be slapped on their products, and their access to fresh fish and their ability to attract workers from outside the UK. Around 25% of their workforce, according to Seafood Grimsby and the Humber spokesman Simon Dewar, who is part of the delegation, said, "It could harm our seafood processing industry. Even if fishermen take home larger catches after the abolition of the common fisheries policy quotas, even if they can catch a bit more haddock and a bit more cod and sell it in Grimsby to be processed, the additional tonnage from the North Sea is unlikely to help the large companies. Let's face facts. Grimsby imports seafood from all over the world. Trade is important to us. We are driven by trade and trade relationships. With Brexit, we might as well have a few more trenches for fish bobbing in. But most we will still be importing. We had a huge whinge and moan about it, but now we need to get on to the food to the front foot. We can take advantage and make things better instead of doom and gloom. But a free trade deal between the region and the EU really a goer. If you don't ask," he replies, "you don't get." Back at the Freeman Street Market, the Mayor of North East Lancashire, Ron Shepherd, has popped into Fred Fish Industries and has been having a chat with Adam. Rod remembers when Fred's was a stall run by Stephen Parkinson, whose family owned it for 60 years, and reminisces about the golden age when hundreds of trawlers linked to the docks and the fleet could have stretched out a mile to sea. "I could climb from ship to ship that will never come back. Though because the infrastructure has changed, the fishing industry is not coming back. Brexit will have nothing to do with that. We are still a gateway to Europe, even though we are leaving the EU. We are seeing more and more people come from outside the UK, and we accept them with open arms." The Mayor is a favourite for an exemption. As a standalone argument, like with farming, it's meant to be a trade deal for North East Lancashire. I will be in favour of that to protect jobs and investment. We need to ensure that the government is aware how much we rely on trade with the European Union and how we rely on imports. I'm just going to stop there for a moment. It's ironic that, again, this region, as they said, voted overwhelmingly, just that region alone was about 74% to leave. And now you have people going, well, we want an exemption. We want a specific trade deal just for our region. We don't want to be a part of Brexit. We want our own special thing. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And this is the attitude that won Brexit. People just thinking, oh, it'll be fine. We'll be fine, and not again listening to the experts who constantly said this will happen. You know, I constantly said the person you want to blame for the problem with fishing isn't the EU, but Nigel Farage, the guy who was in charge of getting a good deal for UK fisheries when they were renegotiating the common fisheries policy, which again all the countries that were part of it said, yeah, it's bad, but we need to make it better. And we've gone into that before. The problem is these tariffs is that the fishermen have constantly lied about how much they actually catch. They are not prepared to admit what they catch because they're terrified that the EU will say, well, you're catching too much. And so what happens is they do catch too much and then they throw it back and it's waste. And even the EU said, yes, that's waste, we need to change it. So when these negotiation talks happened, Nigel Farage turned up for one and then didn't turn up for the rest. And by the way, didn't say anything in that particular meeting. Except, oh yeah, we're going to leave the EU, and when we do, our fishing is going to be so much better. Well, here's the thing. Fish don't respect borders. And by the way, the UK fishermen now fishing grounds are now reduced by about 66%. So Yeah, this isn't a good deal when you look at a whole. It really isn't. So anyway, we continue. Ron goes back to the market seminar room where a remembrance service has just taken place. A few local dignitaries are discussing the short film, The Grimsby Chums, a heartbreaking story about the young men who fought at the Battle of the Somme at the time when their town was the busiest fishing port in the world. During the Second World War, one tells me, fish and chips were the only food not rationed because of the dangers faced by trawlermen at sea. I grab a few words with the local Labour MP, Melin Oren, who is worried that the region will take a big hit on exiting the European Union. She says, the biggest issue is delays, she says. We have things imported which are usually coming from Northern Europe. Every time they stop at a border, if there is a delay for paperwork, it puts goods in peril. They are perishable. They cannot wait forever. Fish has a short shelf life. It could be destroyed, and the quality of the food that we would normally be eating and serving to our customers would be damaged irreparably. Stephen White, the chairman for the enrolled freemen of Grimsby, disagrees. I think a unique deal is inconceivable, he says. It's all in or nothing. This is an opportunity here for entrepreneurs to thrive. There are too many scaremongers. This is the exact same thing we've been hearing constantly. Just like, oh, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. It's these people are just scaremongering. It's just Project Fear all over again. His organisation is at the forefront of the Freeman Street Regeneration Scheme. More than £1 million has been invested in the indoor market, which is located next to the fish docks. Down the road is the red brick dock tower, built in 1852. It provided hydraulic power and modelled on the 14th century Torre del Magina in Siena, a reminder of a long-standing continental connections. I was in favour of coming out of Europe, Stephen tells me. We were hoodwinked into joining it. No, you weren't. There'll be a bit of a bumpy ride, of course, in the short term. And, of course, that is what all these Brexiteers are pinning their hopes on, that everything is just going to be short term. And by short term, they literally mean no more than a year. Before leaving a market, I talked to Terry and Sue Parnell, the only remainers I came across on my travels. I don't think anybody appreciated the difficulties, says Sue. A lot of them wanted to go back to the way they remembered, but I can't see there's any point in going backwards when it's the young people who will be dealing with it in the future. The majority of the young people want to stay in Europe because they see the opportunities there. What about the exemption, he asks. Everyone else in the country will want one then. Terry chuckles. And they'll all say they are a special case. The couple who are looking forward to singing Christmas carols down by the docks are dismayed at the image Grimsby has down south. In words, it's worlds apart, sighs Sue. Mind you, we are in the back choir, which is not a thing associated with the stereotype of this town. This is the stereotype which has undoubtedly contributed to the sense of feeling patronised, taken for granted, left behind. Locals feel they have been sneered at by broadsheet snobs, exploited by poverty porn TV shows, and ridiculed by Hollywood movie stars. The late A.A. Gill, Channel 4's Skint, and Sarah Baron Cohen and Sacha Baron Cohen all agreed on one thing: it's grim in Grimsby. To Gill, it was a byword for all that was crass and broken in Britain. Locals accused the Channel 4 documentary makers of demonising one of its most impoverished estates, and Cohen's portrayal of Nobby, a jobless layabout addicted to benefits, booze and hooliganism, might have flopped at the box office, but his film called Grimsby left southern audiences in no doubt that the dilapidated port was a hotbed for drinking, drug dealing and all-around general depravity. As shoppers in Fishley Place shopping centre next to the railway station confirmed, Brexit was a visceral reaction to a neglect by a distant political establishment to the economy anxiety caused by globalisation, the Cold War's legacy, and a sense that Westminster had sold them down the river to Brussels. The economy might be stalling, and the government might be decaying, but like Rust Belt America's staying loyal to Donald Trump, support for Leave remains firm. Despite the president's disastrous record, he is still feeling the love from his core voters. His supporters, noted the influential newsletter Politico, are energised by his bombast and animus more than any actual accomplishments. We Remainers might have to decide that the wheels are coming off, and that some Leavers might be expressing buyer's remorse. But in a region which has struggled since the dramatic decline of the fishing industry, and that is still feeling the anguish and isolation of post-industrial neglect, Brexit remains an important symbol of taking back control. And that's not going to happen. When Brexit happens, there is not going to be this flood of capital and this sudden, oh yes, the north of England, it's going to be, fantastic again. It's not going to happen. I live in Barnsley, and Barnsley was the second or third highest to vote for this, for the exact same reason, that somehow, once we leave the European Union, all this money is going to come flooding back, and it's not going to happen. What needs to happen is a massive change in economic policy and the way that we invest in the UK. That is not happening. And the people driving Brexit, they want cheaper imports. That will not help local businesses if there are cheaper, import options. Most of what the people in Westminster pushing for Brexit are the complete removal of all tariffs. They want complete and absolute free trade. They don't want any sort of government involvement. That's their version of free trade. What they want is even more globalisation. But of course, you try telling people this and warning people this. In fact, there's a great book about this called The Great Brexit Swindle. I highly recommend you go and read it. So we continue. The utopian fantasy of becoming, in the government's words, an independent coastal state on the day we leave the European Union continues to hold sway, as does the bombastic claim by Fisheries Minister George Eustace that we will re-establish national control of our waters for 200 nautical miles. I think we should have our own rules and regulations and not let another country tell us what to do, Janet Perkins tells me when we arrive at the shopping centre, passing the National Fishing Heritage Centre and the Ross Tiger, the last surviving old-style trawler along the way. Her granddaughter Hannah disagrees, but Janet insists the 26-year-old is too young to really understand it all. Terry and Wendy, a couple in their 70s, are desperate to turn the clock back. There used to be 400 trawlers, remembers Terry. Now there's half a dozen. I think we can be a great fishing port again. Wendy, who used to work on the dock, says, I loved working down there. It was like another little world. It would be nice if we could get our own fishing grounds back and do what we wanted to instead of all of them taking all our fish. All of these foreigners are coming over here and taking all of our houses. None of them work, but they all get houses and money. We should stop them coming and living here. We've never had so much crime. Well... Maureen Wood doesn't mind if food prices go up as long as we're out. Whatever the downsides, it's better to coming out. We can get our fishing rights back, and fears about slow transit times and high tariffs are, she posits, are a load of bullshit scaremongering. An elderly man sitting next to her reveals he didn't vote. Why ever not? She asks. I'm a Jehovah's Witness, he replies. Do you remember the Lord's Prayer and where you pray for God's kingdom to come? That's the government we want. That's not going. That's going to solve all our problems. It appears the cunning plan by seafood chefs to deliver Grimsbyrians from the evils of Brexit have fallen short on deaf ears. So that is the probably the most funniest thing I'd say to happen, because just asking for like a special exemption, and he's absolutely hilarious. Oh yeah, Brexit can happen except for us. We want to be exempt from it. That is absolutely hilarious. And this is not just in Grimsby. This is the same attitude in Barnsley, the rest of the north of England that voted to leave, because as they somehow believe, as was stated, we are somehow going to, Britain is going to pull up anchor and we're just going to sail off into the sea somewhere, and it'll all be, chips and gravy for the, forever. But it's not going to be like that. And the problem is that these people have been sold a fantasy. And people like Nigel Farage and all the other Leavers, Dan Abbott, have sold an absolute fantasy to people. And unless these people come to terms with the reality and the fact that the UK has changed as a whole, then you're just asking for trouble. Because here's the thing, when we leave, we will need our own fishing policy. And what that fishing policy is, it's probably going to resemble the one we have with the European Union. There will be quotas, and the fishermen will do exactly what they have been doing to the European Union. They will lie about how much they catch. And of course, we will continue this game again. And then people might realise that it wasn't the EU's fault, it was the people that were voted in charge, like Nigel Farage, as I mentioned multiple times in this. He was meant to, favour the case for British fisheries, and the fishermen, but he didn't. On that, that Brexit flotilla that floated up the Thames, if I was a captain of a fishing boat and Nigel Farage walked on my deck, I would quickly walk him off the other end straight into the Thames. That would have been the political stunt. I would, then, that's the unfortunate reality we live in. There's hundreds of people that just have no idea what they voted for, but they have a fantasy was what they voted for, but the reality is completely different.